Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to build 4 of my previous computers in order to look at the titles from the Need for Speed series. And since this was done before, we are going to look from a different angle. Join me as we look at the dashboard view for the games in the Need for Speed series. We will look at unmodified versions of the games, the way Electronic Arts released them. We will not include any fan-made dashboards. I plan to have the computer configurations somewhat better than the requirements for any game. And we are going to start with the computer I had in the early 2000s, and this one will handle the games from Road and Track Presents the Need for Speed until Need for Speed Porsche. This is a Socket A motherboard made by Matsonic, supporting both SD-RAM and DD-RAM. With an universal AGP, 5 PCIs, and also a CNR slot, it's not exactly the model I had, but it's the closest I could find. The CPU is the Athlon XP 1600 Plus. I had a memory module with 128 MB capacity, and a year after I bought the motherboard, I also got a passively cooled GeForce 4 MX440 by Pallet. For the hard drive, I had a 40 GB Maxtor, but I will use this Seagate instead. Now let's assemble everything. We will start with the CPU, and then we add the radiator and fan. We assemble everything onto the motherboard and then add the graphics card. Everything's ready to go, and after installing Windows 98, we fire up the first title in the series. And unfortunately, there's no sound either from the onboard or any sound card I tried, so we invite Daniel, the human car sound guy, to take over for the engine. Having started on the wrong foot, and considering the sheer number of titles in this series, I don't plan on wasting too much time with this, and I decided to use a motherboard reserved for a future project and get some sound. We move all the components to a new motherboard and start the game one more time. This version of the game offers 3 different cameras, a special small screen where we can see some gear lever action, and no way of looking behind. For the replay we have 6 different types of cameras. Right from the start I already miss Daniel, as this doesn't sound at all like a high revving engine. We return to the Matsonic motherboard in order to continue with our late 90s titles. Need for Speed 2 has 4 types of camera views and about 9 types of replays, and is the first game that allows the player to look behind. Need for Speed 3 has 3 types of camera views and about 9 types of views for the replays. For Need for Speed High Stakes, there's no way to start the game with the direct 3D renderer, so we turn to the software renderer. The fourth entry in the Need for Speed series has 4 types of camera views and 9 types of replays.
3, 2, 1, go!
Need for Speed Porsche has 4 types of camera views and allows the player to look left and right. There are also many types of cameras for the replays, about 9 of them. There is also another franchise, the V-Rally, for which Electronic Arts has acquired the publishing rights in the North American market and added the Need for Speed name, probably for drawing attention to it. The first entry in this franchise has no dashboard view and offers 6 cameras and replays. The second entry in the V-Rally series was also branded with the Need for Speed name in North America and offers a dashboard view and other 5 types of cameras. There's also the possibility of several cameras for the replays. The second computer we are looking at today is the Socket 939 I got in 2006. The motherboard is made by Epox and has DDR, an AGP port, and 5 PCI slots. On the back there are the standard connectors. The CPU I had with this board was the Athlon X2 4200 Plus. The graphics card is a 6800 GT by Gainward that has a custom radiator since the original fan broke at some point. I only got this graphics card in 2008. The hard drive I had back then was a Western Digital 160GB, but since I no longer have that one, I replaced it with the Western Digital Blue with 320GB capacity. Now let's assemble everything onto the bench table. I was able to find the Arctic cooling radiator I had back then, but unfortunately a part that grabs onto the support went missing over the years. I'm just going to use it for recording this video, but once I need to power it on, I will replace it with a proper radiator. It's important to never use radiators that are not complete or have missing parts. We continue by adding the graphics card. For memory, I had some generic KingMax modules with 2 modules of 1 GB capacity and another 2 modules with 512 MB capacity, making it a total of 3 GB. After the build is complete, I will install Windows XP and we will continue where we left off. This computer will play the games from the second iteration of Hot Pursuit until Need for Speed Carbon. Unfortunately for the goal of this clip, all of them dropped the dashboard view, so we are forced to look at the tracks from the hood camera. Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2 has 4 types of camera views and no replay, and is the first game that dropped the dashboard view, so we will try to replace it with the bumper or the hood view.
Commencing pursuit. Vehicle is a silver exotic. This is way too dangerous. I'm discontinuing pursuit.
The next game we have on our list is Need for Speed Underground with 3 cameras and no replay. Need for Speed Underground 2 has 4 cameras and several replay cameras. next game we are looking at is 2005's Most Wanted, that has 4 cameras and no replay. We are currently looking at Need for Speed Carbon that has 3 cameras and no replay. preferred system in this project. I started using it at the end of 2010 and had a Core i7-920, but 3 years later I upgraded to a Core i7-980X CPU. The motherboard is an Asus Rampage Extreme 3 that has triple channel and all the modern ports in the backplate area. I started with 3 memory modules, 1 GB capacity each, and after a few years I upgraded with another 3 modules of 4 GB capacity. The initial graphics card I had for this system was a 295 GTX, but it developed an odd issue when both graphic cores are enabled. In order for it to function, I have to disable one graphics core. We will not use it for this clip, but still it was good until 2013, when I replaced it with this Sapphire 7970 GHz edition that we will be using today. For storage, I used a RAID 0 composed of 3 Velociraptors, 150 GB each, but looking at this in detail is for another time. Today we will be using the backup I had back then, 120 GB Kingston HyperX. Now let's assemble the build. We won't spend too much time here, as this is not a retro PC, as I used it until 2021, and probably I could still use it right now, but 10 years was enough. We pick up the Need for Speed series with the king of shaking camera, the Need for Speed ProStreet, that has 4 cameras and no replay. The next one in the series is the king of motion blur and tunnel vision. Like ProStreet, Need for Speed Undercover has 4 types of cameras and no replays. Finally, we are back with the dashboard view from a surprising entry in the simulators class. Need for Speed Shift has 4 cameras and can also do replays. This is also a surprise entry, as Need for Speed Nitro was released only for the Nintendo consoles and features some disproportionate vehicles, has 4 types of cameras and no replays. The surprises don't stop here. Need for Speed World is another surprise entry, as this is a massive multiplayer online racing game that has some RPG elements. The game has 4 types of camera and no replay. the well of ideas seems to have dried out after this period, as the next title in our journey is called Hot Pursuit, and it's a reboot of the 1998 version. We are currently looking at the remaster from 2020. The game has 4 cameras and no replay. We are back with the new simulator that doesn't even have the Need for Speed in the name. This is Shift to Unleashed, and it improves on the previous Shift title with a new helmet camera that we are currently looking at, and also the replays are back. Need for Speed The Run is a step back into familiar territory for the Need for Speed series. It has 3 cameras and no replays. Also, the dashboard view is forever lost starting with this title. No, I'm not filming in black and white. It's just the way my current PC looks after I took out the graphics card for a regular cleanup. We're not going to talk about this configuration, as this is not a retro PC, but there's a Ryzen 5900X in there somewhere, and the graphics card is a 1080 Ti. Need for Speed Most Wanted is next on our list, and it further reduces the number of available cameras with only 2 options, bumper and tail camera, and no inputs. Need for Speed Rivals was released in 2014 and it only has only 2 camera options and no replays. In 2015, a Need for Speed title was released. It offers the possibility of 5 camera options that will become pretty standard for the next games. There are no replays, and you always have to have an active internet connection. Need for Speed Payback was released in 2017 and it offers the same basic 5 camera options and no replays.
Wonder which one of you's King Snake. Oh well, guess I'll have to beat all of you.
Hey, you thought I wasn't watching you? I know what you're doing, and it is not our deal. I say when the cards come down, remember?
I got tired of waiting. I'm taking care of business. Not bad. Time to take the lead.
King Snake, halfway point's coming up. Show us what you've got and take the lead.
Come on, Tyler. Can't let King Snake win this.
You know what? Fine. Take this win and enjoy it. But get the hell out after. You're my ace in the hole.
That's the plan.
I don't know who you are, Sidewinder, but you're gonna regret this.
Your rigged races are done, Navarro.
Tyler Morgan?
What is it, Weir?
Okay, enjoy the win, but remember, I need you alive.
Need for Speed Heat was released in 2019 and it offers the same basic 5 camera options and no replays. Need for Speed Unbound was released in 2022 and it offers the same basic 5 camera options and no replays.
So, you like to play rough?
Please, I let you do that. I see how it is. You can't keep this up. Oh, you think you're on shit, don't you?
I'm not going to let that slide. This should come as no surprise to you. The last
Just trading some paint.
Oh, I ain't about to let you get away with that.
Be gentle with her.
Woo! Sorry about that.
Now let's see what makes these games look fast, and how are the developers tricking us into thinking that we are driving cars going anywhere between 100 and 250 miles per hour from the comfort of our chairs or sofas. A few years ago, a video showing the perception of speed for a train went viral. Since I don't own that clip, I tried making one of my own. I'm gradually decreasing the field of view of one of my dashboard camera clips to show how the perception of speed reduces as we narrow the field of view. This is in no way slowed down, I'm just restricting the view by focusing further ahead. Let's go back to the normal zoom and try to approach the problem by blocking out the center this time and leaving out the peripheral view in order to try to explain this behavior. The utility poles are positioned at 50 meters from each other. When we resume the clip, the closest one will stay in our field of view for a very short time, leaving the field of view in a split second. The second utility pole will be visible for around 3 seconds. Looking well ahead, at about 300 meters, there's another utility pole that will be in our field of view for about 11 seconds. Because we know that the car's speed is constant, this means that all the utility poles are coming at us with the same speed. But the closer ones seem to move faster than the distant ones. There are two concepts that work together to create this impression: the depth and motion perception. While the depth perception is the ability to perceive the relative distance of objects in the environment, motion perception is the ability to perceive the relative speed of the objects in the environment. Because of depth perception, closer objects will look larger to us, and we will have this big part of our viewing area moving through the front of our eyes in a short amount of time. Objects in the distance, although being the same size, will look smaller to us to the point where they are barely visible. It will take some time for these objects to occupy the same area in our field of view as the objects we have just passed. But as we get closer to them, and they start to occupy a bigger area of our field of view, we begin to accurately appreciate the speed with which they are approaching. To make it short, as you move, things closer to you appear to be moving faster than things that are further away. One method of creating the impression of speed is playing around with the field of view. By expanding it, as we can see in this ProStreet clip, the developer forces us to take in more fast-moving objects in the periphery of our vision, thus creating a strong impression of speed. This method is used in order to give a sensation of fast acceleration. We can see that even if the car is going faster just a few seconds later, the field of view is again narrow, and there's not as much action going on in the periphery as it was seconds ago when the acceleration was very strong. The same method is applied in Need for Speed The Run, but it's not accompanied by the shaky camera, making it more smooth. Even the simulators apply this to a lesser degree, having only a limited amount of room for expanding or narrowing the field of vision when using the first-person view. Another way of creating the sensation of speed is by using the motion blur. This had a very noticeable effect in the games from the 2000s. The motion blur simulates an expansion of the field of view by narrowing the area that's in focus while blurring the rest of the image and giving the impression of lots of things going on in the blur around the focusable central point. This can also be combined with the actual expansion of the field of view for a greater effect. But with Need for Speed Undercover, even when the car is not under acceleration, the motion blur is permanently noticeable after a certain speed. Newer entries to the franchise are using a more subtle way of focusing the vision to a central point by adding all sorts of animations and quickly moving them out of sight to create the impression of speed. When we started this side quest, we discussed about the depth and motion perception of the human eye. These are the two main attributes of the parallax effect. As an observer moves, the objects closer to them appear to move quicker across their field of view than objects that are further away. This is because the closer objects are staying for a shorter time in the field of view. Together with the depth perception, this creates a difference in the apparent motion of objects based on their distance from the observer. Let's have a look at an example from the original Need for Speed. The utility pole is closer to the track and it will move the fastest. The brown house is second closest and it will move slower than the pole. The third object is the tall building in the back that moves the slowest. Let's see that again. There are other games in the franchise that do the motion parallax effect great honor. Similar to what we've seen for the motion blur, using an actual tunnel is like having a manual way of forcing the user to focus on a narrower point, the tunnel exit. By using a tunnel, the game introduces fast-moving surfaces closer to the center area of the vision. This forces the user to focus his view further along the tunnel or on the exit, while all of the tunnel's moving details are sent in the periphery, increasing the perception of speed. As more details, static or dynamic lights are added to the tunnel, they further increase the sensation of speed. Many games in the Need for Speed franchise do tunnels very good, but rivals are taking it to a hypnotic level. And it doesn't always have to be a tunnel. As in Need for Speed World, you can speed up through narrow streets that offer just free fast-moving surfaces closer to the center of vision. We have learned that by adding details, it makes for a busy periphery and a greater sensation of speed, but let's see what subtracts from that. Lately, I have noticed an increase in the size of the traffic lane. While in 2005 a lane was barely larger than a small Chevrolet, it steadily grew over time. In Need for Speed Unbound, the lane is large enough to have two S13 side by side. The simulators, on the other hand, are totally lacking these markings, as most of the action is done on an actual circuit, and they don't benefit from these details, so the sensation of speed may be diminished. It's not only the traffic lanes that add to the sensation of speed. Other vehicles in traffic, moving at a different rate of speed, can also draw the player's attention and eye focus, so again these may increase the perception of speed as details go past in the periphery. I actually found this stage of Unbound quite difficult, as the traffic was so heavy I had to restart a few times, and there was no way for me to catch up to the competition once we entered this area, as my attention was required just to avoid incoming traffic. Camera position is a good way of conveying the sense of speed to the user, but camera shake can get downright scary in ProStreet, where it combines with decreased handling of the car as the speed increases. Playing on these two factors has a great effect I only encountered once, on a lesser degree, in Dirt Rally 2.0. Directly comparing ProStreet with 2005's Most Wanted, the two cars traveling at about the same speed, there's more noticeable shake in ProStreet, and also an increased struggle to keep the car on the road. The simulators are also making use of camera shake in order to convey the sense of speed, but I feel that Need for Speed Shift goes a little overboard, but not as much as ProStreet. And I find the almost ideal camera shake only with the second iteration of Shift. Games like Need for Speed 2 are also using this technique, but only when making turns or going over uneven ground. Another type of camera encountered in the Need for Speed series is the instant replay camera, that in my opinion reduces the immersion by distracting the user from the normal racing line or the road he was following. Particles are also an interesting part, as they add realism and can also help enhance the sensation of speed. From what I observed, Rivals may be the king of particle and lights, with anything from leaves, water droplets, parts of other cars. I can almost feel my allergies acting up. But other games can also make use of particles to enhance realism. The rain and sparks from Need for Speed paint a very accurate picture. I also found the mist of water particles in the modern Most Wanted, a one-of-a-kind particle effect not really found in many other games. Besides Rivals, Payback has a very nice effect for the exhaust particles and when using the nitrous oxide. And also Need for Speed Underground 2 has a nice effect. When it comes to lights and particles, Unbound replaces some of them with animations that detract from realism. Unbound still keeps a very nice rain effect, as we've seen before.
Need for Speed Porsche Unleashed has snow that is not very common among other games in the series.
Since we also introduced realism in our analysis, the speedometer is a bridge between our real perception of speed and the way the game depicts it. I'm sad to say that 2012's Most Wanted is far from my perception of speed, and the speedometer seems to somehow exaggerate on that speed. Need for Speed World falls victim to the same issue, as I approximate the real speed to be half the speed presented on the speedometer. Need for Speed, although real in some visual aspects, makes the car also feel a bit slower than in real life. I think that applying the ProStreet treatment, with shaking the camera and making the car more difficult to control as it gets faster, could work wonders on the lack of synchronization between the actual speed and the speedometer as shown in these games. Now let's see how these games depict a car turning around a corner. This is usually done by making the front end of the car turn towards the bend, and depending on the speed of the car, the tightness of the bend, the car is angled from the central line more or less to provide us with the feedback that we are doing a good or a poor job steering around the corner. This also helps with the concepts of under and oversteer. Most of the games do a good job providing this feedback, but I feel that the simulators are doing a great job. But there are exceptions, and Rivals sometimes feels like Gran Turismo from this point of view. Need for Speed Nitro is at the opposite end of the scale, sometimes offering too much angle, making us think that the car will spin out of control. The first-person view, where available, offers an interesting perspective, as the head turns before turning the wheels towards the corner, anticipating the turn. The sound is also a part of our senses, and these games do a good job providing us with the proper noises. I used this part of Need for Speed Most Wanted to show the change in the pitch of the engine sound as the rotations per minute increase. Shift 2 is used for showing the engine hit the limiter. Then we move along with the Lancia Delta Integrale to hear the sounds of the turbine. Sound is integrated in the environment, and we are back with 2005's Most Wanted to hear the engine sound bounce off the walls of a tunnel. We skip to Need for Speed The Run to hear the car interact with the pebbles from the road, and also a very nice implementation of the nitrous oxide injection into the engine. Too bad the engine sounds a bit underwhelming. We are back to environment sounds with a very nice Doppler effect from Need for Speed Porsche. We conclude our audio tour with the sounds of wind, rain and thunder in Need for Speed Rivals. Before starting this clip, I had a list with many points in the visual and audio department, and I was able to find most of them in the franchise, but I wasn't lucky to find them all in one place. I can imagine that the programming effort would have been inhuman. Still, there are points I haven't touched, like the force feedback, or adjusting the field of view angle depending on the monitor. Rating the games by the sensation of speed puts ProStreet in front, followed by the simulators. Rating the games by realism puts the simulator in front, followed by Porsche. Most of the other titles fall into the arcade area, where they are set apart by how many elements of a simulator they integrate, or how fun it is to drive the car. Overall, I would say that Need for Speed Most Wanted is where I had the most fun, followed by the underground games and Porsche, with an honorable mention for the simulators and the early games. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.